Today, Open Source Security is talking to Aaron Frost, CEO of Hero Devs. Aaron, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I guess my favorite thing in life is my five kids. So I'm a dad, and I have five best friends.
Oh, nice.
Yep, 19 down to seven.
Wow.
And I'm a twin. So if you ever see me in public, and I'm not saying hi back, it's because it's the evil twin. Um, so I started my career in software testing, moved to software development, got heavily involved in the community. When Angular came out, I was kind of like an influencer in Angular, where Google built the framework. I helped build the community. We built the biggest Angular conference, the biggest Angular podcast, and put together a really valuable Angular consulting practice. And then we put together, this product that launched us into providing open source updates for all open source frameworks, not just Angular. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my history. It comes from JavaScript, heavy JavaScript pre-Angular. It was just all JavaScript, and so and then expanded into other technologies. So yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. So I invited you here today because I am I guess intrigued, I'll call it, of the Hero Devs business model, which is
Mhm.
it reminds me of how Red Hat sort of works, but not exactly, where you're kind of
Yeah.
supporting software, doing the backports of it, and maintain kind of keeping things alive for your customers, which explain
Yeah.
that bit to us, and then we'll kind of go off to, dive into the weeds all about, backports and security and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, hey, I owe you a buck after the show for comparing me to Red Hat. We we are kind of like them, so like it's a really valid comparison. When people ask me what I'm like, it sounds stupid to say Red Hat, but that
I
is
mean,
it.
it's yeah.
It's not invalid. So we take open source software that's lovely, widely adopted, built by beautiful people, and it's either the whole project or a version of the project which has reached end of life, and a section of the community, almost always enterprise or government, big
Yeah,
enterprise,
yeah,
they get stuck and they can't move. A lot of people are stuck, but only the biggest ones are stuck and are forced to get compliant though. So they need
yeah.
someone to provide updates on that stuck version.
Wow.
Smaller SMB market companies, they can skirt by on that deprecated version and be fine. But
Yeah, yeah.
um, so we take members from the contributing team to the frameworks, we hire them, and we use them to continue providing an extended long-term support that we affectionately call never-ending support,
Yep.
and we keep these favorite libraries going forever. Like some examples, the first project was Angular JS. Google end of life for that on December 31st, 2021. Our next project was Vue. It was just version 2 of Vue. Vue 3 is fine. If you look at the state of JS report, it's the fastest growing front end framework. So we take versions. Recently, we took Spring 5, which was end of life, while Spring 6 continues, and we took .NET 6, while .NET 9 and 10 are under development. So um, that's what we do. We keep the runway extended for businesses who need a bit more time to migrate away. And the reasons why they can't migrate away is something that I didn't have a concept of as a community member until I started talking to the business owners of these projects. So yeah.
I mean, I spent a decade at Red Hat, and that's exactly what Red
Right.
Hat does. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. Like if you think of Red Hat keeping the OS alive and some of the components of the OS, and I'm keeping the whole app platform above that
yeah,
alive,
yeah.
then you're like, oh yeah, goddamn, I know what he does.
Right,
Like
right.
that makes
Okay.
sense what Hero Devs is doing.
So I I want to talk about kind of what the backport thing means because I think that's really important for this conversation. And I'm going to briefly explain it and then you can correct all the things I get wrong. So
Okay.
what you're talking about is you've got this version of something. We'll say, what React, not Angular, right? Angular was your first, you
Okay.
said.
Angular one, yeah.
So there's a version of Angular someone is running, and there are going to be bug fixes and security patches and all kinds of development happening on this project. And now, if you're a company and you're running that version and you can't upgrade for some reason, and there's a million reasons that can happen, and you have to, we'll say, have security patches, you have to have bug fixes for a variety of reasons. This is what you're doing: is you're going to the upstream, you're cherry picking like security fixes, you're changing them in whatever way they need to be changed, because you can't just like take a fix from a modern version of something and try to dump it into a version that's, let's say, 5 or 10 years old. You have to massage the patch and make sure it doesn't break anything. And there's new APIs, there's new all kinds of stuff, right? Then you have
Mm-hmm.
that backport. So now that company, that enterprise that's running the old version can say, we have fixed this security vulnerability, we have fixed this bug in this version of the thing we are running. And then
Mm-hmm.
they can pass their audit, they can not corrupt their data, whatever it is they're trying to do. Did I get it?
No, I mean, you basically hit it straight down the fairway with your explanation. So we provide like three features in our never ending supported version. We'll give you compatibility fixes. So like imagine a new version of Safari Mobile comes out and your date pickers are all broken
Ah,
because the
right.
framework broke. And that we would be like, oh, your compatibility is busted. We'll give you a compatibility bump for your Safari Mobile the release that's coming. Or so we'll give you compatibility fixes is one. The next one is we're giving you security fixes. Um, so anything, if you report it, if I report it, or if one of my other customers reports it, or if just anyone on earth reports it, I will fix it and give you the update. And there's
Yeah.
some nuances in there, whether you reported it, a different customer, I found it. We also do like ethical bug hack, security hacking programs to get people to like ethically report stuff. And then the third thing you get is you get this SLA on top of it, which you don't get in SLA typically with open source. Like, um, you go out and you use Tomcat. There's no like, I guarantee X. There's no, the
Yeah.
word warrant and the word guarantee does not exist except to say without warrant or without guarantee. And
That's
so,
right. That's right.
um, yeah. And so we give a warranty and we give a guarantee on top of the software, which that's called an SLA. And it's really valuable because when you're out, your PCI is looking at you, Josh, is your app safe to process payment cards? That's a serious question. It's not a joke. That's like they take that, the PCI auditors get paid big money to make sure you're PCI compliant. Or if
Yeah.
you took 50 million to build an app for the government, you guaranteed this app will always be secure and it will always be FedRAMP compliant. Well, FedRAMP compliant means security fixes for critical issues are fixed within 14
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
And so if you can't substantiate that you're capable of fixing something in 14 days, then you're technically not FedRAMP compliant, or you're not PCI compliant, or you're not capable. You shouldn't be allowed to house HIPAA data, or in California, FERPA data for children. And so um, being able to pass that compliance audit is a big deal. So you get an SLA, which is the third thing we're giving to you. So you pass your audits, whether it's a private equity firm is buying you and you're doing due diligence, or one of those other auditors I talked about. The shocking thing is a lot of our own customers, they guaranteed to their customers that they would never ship insecure software. So it's
Yeah.
their own SLA to their customers that they're violating. So the gun pointed at their head is their own SLA. And so we we show up and we say, hey y'all, just chill. Here's a drop-in replacement. It's 5 minutes to swap this out. Like Indiana Jones swapping the golden statue for some sand. Like it's just swatch it over and you're good. The good news though is like when Hero Dev swaps, like you don't the cave doesn't fall apart and you run away from a giant stone. And so it's a seamless crossover and all the auditors and compliance gets taken care of in 5 minutes. It's a really cool product.
That's great. Okay. So let's talk about that though, because I think at the open source world, we kind of covered what backporting means. There's this whole mantra of, oh, just upgrade, where
Yeah,
anytime you're using an open source application, you're building on top of open source and you say, oh, I'm running this old version. What should I do? And all of the community members are like, just upgrade. It's fine. And that's not
yeah.
always reasonable, especially in large companies, right?
True. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, when I started this gig, I that was my action was like, I don't know why these lazy sons of guns wouldn't have updated and why they're gonna drive off the end of support.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm gonna sell this for 25 bucks a year or something silly. But when I got on the phone with them, big enterprise fintech customers that I guarantee every single one of your customers has heard of. or your listeners, sorry, I was shocked at the legal dilemma. As a community person, I had no concept the business and legal problem created by the end of support date. What seems like commonplace to me is, oh, that version is no longer supported. In a legal world is a nightmare. And so the companies told me, hey, we're literally screwed. And some of them fall into, there's kind of three categories. I definitely, no matter what, cannot upgrade, which is crazy. I can tell you stories. The next one is I can upgrade, but I'm never going to get the budget to do it. I could technically, but there's no well to go grab more water from to get this app migrated. And then the third one is we are migrating, but we need more time.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, Josh, I promise on every call that I'm talking to my customers, I'm like, look, the most responsible thing you can do is upgrade. And I say that because that's a responsible thing to say. But I also want to know why haven't you? And so we have some data from our customer on why they haven't. And let me just say, I think the majority of the community sits over in this pool where it's like, we're just going to keep the old version. We don't care that it's unsupported. But this like 10% of the community, and that 90% probably thinks I'm just like a parasite, but I have reasons why I'm not. But the 10% that we're serving, they think we're the bee's knees. Like they love that we're out here making sure that they're safe for as long as they need to.
yeah.
Can I talk about why we're not parasitic?
I would love to hear why you're okay. Let me first set the stage here.
Okay,
So
sorry.
I have
Yeah.
some friends. I do a lot in the vulnerability world. And I have some friends, and I'm like, oh, I'm talking to Hero Devs in a little while. Like, oh, Hero Devs, those guys became CVE CNAs just to find security vulnerabilities so they can, charge more money for their product and lure people in. And at first I was like, oh man, that's wild. And then I did some research, and you guys have filed 9 CVEs. So I'm like, that feels like a bad business model, 9 CVEs. But more importantly, I was thinking about it. I'm like, this is basically what Red Hat does. Like, I don't think I have a problem with this. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's and okay, Aaron, take it from there.
Okay. So I'm gonna make an assumption that could be challenged, though it would be semantic an argument. But there's two really big problems I think in open source. Um, one that's the biggest problem I think for the consumer, and that is that the support and maintaining support and security for as long as you need it to be secure.
Sure.
And the second problem is that the authors are not getting paid any money. And so
Yes.
those are two really big problems. And I know that there's some projects like I'll use the Spring team because I generally think that's a great team of open source authors. And they're getting paid, but a lot of these projects that we all love, it's a lot of donated time. So Hero
Yeah.
Devs is doing two things to address those problems. By forking and supporting the dead versions, the end of life versions of these softwares, we collect some revenue for that, and we donate a significant portion of that back to the projects. And
Nice.
here's how the conversation goes: we say, hey, project owners, we would like to sell. We're going to do this just so you know it's happening. If you will link to us on your website, we're going to donate a 2-digit number of our revenue back to y'all. And they go, whoa, so you'll donate to fund the future versions, and we get to successfully walk away from the old version, knowing that there's a company we can trust taking care of that part of our community. And I'm like,
Nice.
yeah, that's exactly it. So we put that together. A lot of our partners we're the top donors to these projects now. So we're literally funding the future of these projects through the sunset of them. It's a really cool model, and I really feel like we're addressing the never-ending security needs that enterprises have, and we're also supporting some of the funding needs that open source projects have. And so I think there's a lot that we're doing to improve the community and make it safe for that 10% that are in those compliance scenarios.
That's pretty cool, man. I did not know that. And
Yeah.
you also like so that 10% you mentioned. I mean, I work with a lot of organizations that are dealing with security vulnerabilities, we'll say. And I think
Mm.
10% is probably a high estimate. I think it's less than that. Where there's an enormous number of just organizations and people and everything that are just running horrendously out of date software, and they don't even care for the most part, because unless an auditor tells them you have to upgrade, they're going to run it until, the sun burns out.
Yeah. A lot of our oldest products continue to grow every year, which is crazy. It's like they've been dead for years. Why are you just barely calling me? But you're right. They care, but only when they get caught. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
as they're getting audited, I get phone calls. The phone calls are really predictable. It's like, oh, you get audited? Yeah. Do you need a version that will pass? Yeah. I'll give you a letter. You'll pass your compliance. Let's go. Takes 5 minutes and we're off to the races. And so, yeah. Um, I will say the 10%, I'm just referring to the giant 1 billion in revenue or more companies out in the world.
that's
Those are the
fair.
ones that are highly motivated to call me. But
That's fair.
we do have value to the rest as well, to your point. But I mean, what you're saying is true. Synopsys put out a report last year, really valuable open source security report, and they gave a ton of really scathing stats about open source and how much the adoption is growing. But one of the stats that shocked me the most was from 2022 to 2023, the number of projects running an open source dependency that has high risk security vulnerabilities in it, known ones, went from 54% in 2022 to 74% in 2023. It went up 20% in a year. So I do think that as projects formalize a quicker cadence of release, which means a quicker cadence of end of life, people are getting left behind faster. I don't actually think open source is getting less secure personally. That could be me being like an optimist, but I do think the release cycles are getting more aggressive, which means the end of life cycles are following that, getting more aggressive too. And so more people are ending up with end of life versions that have no security exploits in them.
Yes, I know this is happening. I have the data. I'm an
Yeah.
armchair data nerd, and so I've taken
Okay.
there's a project called Ecosystems by a guy named Andrew Nesbitt, and I suck down
Okay.
all of his data all the time, and I poke around at it. And yeah, everything is growing like crazy. Like there's
Yeah.
10 million open source projects basically in the world right now, and if you look at all of the versions of all of the, X projects times X versions they've released, it's like 110 million right now. Like it's completely
Wow.
mind-boggling numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And yeah,
crazy.
and depending upon what you're running, depending upon the dependencies inside of the thing you're running, who know you have like thousands of things, and who knows what the versions even are. And I have a
Yeah.
suspicion. You mentioned that you're seeing older things getting more business now, which the first thing I thought of is, as you're seeing these things like FedRAMP and the FDA and even some of the EU, the NIS2 standard in Europe catching on, they're telling these companies, these regulated industries, you have to like give us a report of what you have, right?
Yeah.
And they probably have never done this before, and so they're like, "Oh crap,
Yeah.
where'd this stuff come from? Wait, how'd that get in
The,
there?"
the crowd of people chest beating to get S bombs and force you to produce a software bill of material that describes all your depths and the depths of your depths nested, that is a really serious growing demand. And being able to produce an SBOM that is clean is a big requirement going
Yeah,
forward. And,
yeah,
standards like PCI version 4 coming out in March, it's getting more strict and it's getting more expedient that people pay attention to.
yep.
Um, Easy to follow things like knowing if your software is secure. It's really not that hard. Like there's so many scanners that are really, really valuable that tell you, y'all, focus on your depths. Like you need to upgrade your versions.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I get it,
And
man.
then you get stuck eventually where I need 10 million to upgrade. You're not going to get it. So
Yes.
hire a red team internally or call hero devs. There are kind of your two options at that point.
Well, and look, I mean, you have a limited number of applications you're supporting. I know you've got some pretty popular. I mean, your focus is like Node.js and the JavaScript ecosystem, which is, it's a pretty big slice of the pie, but like you're still not, there's tons of stuff you don't cover, right?
Yeah. So we launched Spring in 2024. So we jumped into the Java space. In December, Struts, that same package that caused the Equifax hack,
Oh yeah.
the $560 million Equifax hack, that had another CVE that we released in a weekend. So we now ship versions of Struts. This year we're going into Tomcat and Hibernate and a bunch of other Apache projects that are complementary to a Struts or a Spring app, just to be clear, or a Grails, a Groovy on Grails app. And we're also, we're getting into .NET. We launched our .NET product supporting
Oh, nice.
.NET 6, which went end of life. There's a lot of anecdotes in that story to tell you, but it was not easy, and we're doing a great job, and customers are happy we're here to support them. But in 2025, we've got Roadmap, which takes us into Python. Django's got an end of life
Nice.
coming up in 2026, so we're trying to get ahead of that by bringing Python and like NumPy and a bunch of other Python things in house, so that we're ahead of the Django end of life, making sure customers have a longer runway for that. So we're trying to expand the breadth of our product offering into other ecosystems, because what we know is the JavaScript community loves what we're doing, and what we have over 800 customers now. We've grown very, very fast in the
Wow.
last few
Nice.
years. Yeah. Those customers are like, y'all, do more breadth, like do more things. Like, thanks for Spring, thanks for .NET, do more. It's like that. So you'll see a lot of new products coming from here this year.
Nice. And it's hard work,
Yeah.
man. Like, I know how it goes.
Yeah.
Adding new
Yeah.
stuff is not simple.
Yeah. Can your friends who said the thing about Hero Devs just launching to submit CVEs
Yeah,
for
yeah.
fun? Can I address that?
Please bring it.
I think it's a valid like conspiracy theory. Personally, like if someone told that to me, I'd be like, this seems legit actually. Like if you can make money on that, it's a cool magic trick. Like the fireman starts the fire and then gets paid to put the fire out. Like it seems like
Right.
a good gig. But that's not how we look at what we're doing. Like these security exploits exist.
Yes, that's right.
The fact that I'm fighting, it's not like I created a hole and then it told her.
Right.
It is already
Right.
there, and I'm just telling the world to fix that. I have a fixed version. Like you need to migrate. If anything, I'm pumping up the volume on the migrate stereo, and the people who can't, I'm pumping up the volume for them to call me too. So like I
Yeah.
see what
Yeah.
they're saying, but I am turning up the volume everywhere, and we're reporting the CVs, and we're not keeping the data selfishly.
Yeah.
And when our fix on an old version applies upstream into the current trunk, we contribute those back to the community
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
still supported version. So we're trying to act well and help out the community.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll call it a conspiracy when you hire developers to add security vulnerabilities and then you fix the security vulnerabilities your developers added, right? Although I guess you wouldn't get that anyway because that wouldn't be in the old version. So you'd
Yeah,
have
it would. It
you
only
have
be in
to
the new
build it.
version.
You need a time machine first, right?
That's a long game.
Then,
That's a
yeah,
real
that's
long
right. That's
game.
right. You gotta
Yeah.
you work on that. All right, Aaron. This has been an absolute treat. I think I've learned a lot. We'll have to have you back someday. There's so much more to talk about in this space, but this has been
Love to.
fantastic, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting it on, and thanks to your listeners for having a place to talk about this stuff.